Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Actually, I should switch that name because I'm always asking people about their reading at the end because their writing gets me so excited. And I think you're going to be delighted to meet my guest today. It's where he's prolific. He has so many books out, but he's here to talk about the one that's just coming out, which is a memoir. So this is what I found out about him. Let me just read this to you. And this inspiring, this is about suffering, his memoir. Okay. In this inspiring, often harrowing narrative, the author chronicles how shortly after he turned 3, he was abandoned by his parents and placed in the care of the government. That led to a childhood of physical and sexual abuse on top of racism and police brutality that he experienced growing up in Brixton, England. This was during the 70s and the 80s. As dark as his early memories are, Wheatle, yes?
Right, yeah, correct.
Wheatle describes his rag game memories with glimmers of hope and appreciation. A striking tribute to Raggé's ability to protect a fragile soul when seemingly everything else had failed him. Now, aren't you already intrigued? I am. Welcome, Alex. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me, Karen. It's a delight to be here.
All right. And Alex has joined us from just outside of London. And so it's already evening for him. I don't know what time it is for you, but it's 1 o'clock for me, lunchtime. So I ask you about, before we get to the memoir, before we get to the book that's coming out, you have been writing novels for quite some time with beautiful, beautiful covers. I mean, they're so engaging. So tell us a little bit about how this kid who had such a tough life ended up being this prolific, award-winning, celebrated author. What was that, briefly, what was that journey like?
Well, Karen, I have to pinch myself because next year will be my 25-year anniversary when my first novel, Bricks in the Rock, was published way back in 1999. But even though you described that I had a very tough time as a kid, based in a notorious children's home that was called Shirley Oaks, where lots of child abuse and sexual abuse occurred. I did have one super skill that kept me going, and that was my ability to read and write. From the age of 5 or 6, I was reading comics and magazines and newspapers. So I always had that, even though in high school, I got expelled 2 or 3 times. What saved me was my ability to write well and read well. And indeed, for my love of comics and magazines, later on in my teenage years, I had a love of nonfiction, which started off when I served time in prison when I was 18 years of age, where I had a mentor, Simeon, who introduced me to his small library that he had in our cell. And I was introduced to the great American writers, writers like Ralph Ellison, writers like Richard Wright, and of that ilk. And so that got me through my term in prison, and it fostered a love of reading within me. And I guess for my mid-20s, I had this dream of I wanted to see my experiences, my friends' experiences, in a form of a fiction book. And so there wasn't too many around. There wasn't any narrative around that spoke to me of my experiences. And so I thought I would fill that niche. It took me a while, but I was determined to get there.
Wow, that's so inspiring. You actually gave me chills talking about it. And because, books are so powerful, aren't there? And our ability to express ourselves. And I can't remember which famous author said it, but I think it was Maya Angelou, but I'm not sure, that if you don't find a book about things that you are interested in, go write it. And that's what you did.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
That is what I wanted to do because I couldn't, even though I love these books about America, as I've mentioned before, the writers like Richard Wright, also James Baldwin, and and I knew more about the American experience than I did of the Black British male experience of somebody like myself,
Like
living
yourself.
through those turbulent times of the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to put that on the page.
So what, you know, we have a lot of writers as an audience, a lot of, everybody's a reader, but we have a lot of authors and aspiring authors that watch this show. Tell us a little bit about the kind of the business side. I mean, here you were 25 years ago, a young man, um, trying to get his first book published. What was
Yeah.
that like? What was that experience like?
It was tough because I didn't know the business. I didn't know anybody within that business. And so my first manuscript was a handwritten one. And I approached the literary agents expecting them to read it. And they would pick it up and look at it like it was something from the toilet or the bathroom, and say that I would have to type it up in double space and make sure the spellings are all correct and all the grammar is precise. And so that obviously gave me a discipline because I was determined to get this right. And so I had to learn that first. I wasn't even aware that you had to approach a literary agent in the first place. I thought you could just send your manuscript into a publisher and hey presto, you get published within 2 weeks. And so that dream kind of hit reality. And so it took me several years to get my first manuscript ready. And so it was it took me a while. So I was working at the time in engineering. So I would work and edit my work from 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock onwards in the evening when the children were
Mm,
in bed. So it taught me a discipline that every writer needs, and you got to have that perseverance too. It's not. I know sometimes we read about it in literary press, but it's not every day that somebody just gets $1 million advance and
mm.
they get all this money for their first book and so on. For most of us, it's a struggle, and we have to stay with that struggle and persevere and stay the course.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Absolutely. And that perseverance is so important. Um, so you've been writing novels,
Yeah.
having success, award-winning, recognized. Why say, okay, it's time for me to change it all up and write a memoir?
I guess I was always going in that direction because my life as a child, as a teenager, as a young man was so eventful, so full of incident, and so full of trauma
Mm.
that I felt that it owed me to write the memoir, especially after Sir Steve McQueen made a drama out of my young life for the Small Axe series. I'm not quite sure if that was available all over the US, but
Okay, wait.
I,
You got to tell me about that. Don't skip over that one. So
right.
Steve McQueen did what?
He made a TV series about certain aspects, certain narratives of the Black community, Black stories in the UK.
Ah,
And I was commissioned as one of the writers. But when he became aware of my backstory, he decided that my narrative will have to find a place in that series. So that was an overwhelming moment and a moment that I'm very proud of. So yes, there's an hour drama about my young life from my time as more like an orphan in the children's home to when I was 18, 19. And so
what
I
was it
thought
called? What's the name of it?
it was simply called Alex Wheatle, part of the Small Axe series.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so with that, and that was first broadcast in the UK 4 years ago now, or 4 or 5 years ago now. And so I decided it's about time that I fill in the gaps, if you like, because in an hour's drama, you cannot fit everything in.
Mm.
And so I decided to take it upon myself. Okay, it's time now to revisit. I mean, some of those moments, as I mentioned earlier, were very traumatic, very troubling, and very triggering. But I felt, I needed to do this for closure, if you like. And also, for my visit to schools, and I relate my story to a school audience, I know that many students will get empowered by it and will get encouraged by it as well, because they can recognize that someone like me with my kind of background can succeed in my chosen field, and perhaps they can too.
Oh, that is so inspiring. You know, we have some things in common. Uh, I grew up. I'm a incest survivor, incest thriver, no longer a survivor. But and so a lot of my novels have stories of abuse, and but I always made it fiction rather than writing a memoir. So you got me thinking. You got me thinking about that. So
Well, that's what I did. That's what I did. In my first two, three novels, I base a lot of that material on real life experiences, not just my own, but real occurrences, if you like, of things I have observed or been witness to, or what occurred to me. I think most people do, but most writers do that, whether it's science
mhm,
fiction, whether it's general fiction or anything else. We cannot help but use our lived experiences to express ourselves in fiction.
it's true. It's true. There's a little bit of me in all my books.
Yeah, I'm sure.
In all my books. So one of the things that I was reading about you, and one of the things that hit me is the power of music, and your memoir really speaks to that. Tell us a little bit about the impact that music had on you.
Well, it hit me in a rush because, when you're living in a community that is 98% white, and you're removed away from your Black identity, and that means that you don't listen, you cannot engage with Black culture, Black music, Black
Mm,
arts.
mm,
And so I grew up listening to pop on the radio. I grew up in a kind of, if you like, a white art world. And so I had no engagement whatsoever with Black arts or Black music. So when I first heard reggae with a friend who used to bring in a boombox to school, it blew me away.
mm,
And when I sat down and listened to the lyrics, when I listened to somebody like Bob Marley or Dennis Brown, I could relate to it. I could relate to that struggle. So I immediately use that as like a life raft, if you like, to get me
mm.
through tough times. I really did, because it spoke to me. The music just made me feel that I'm not alone in this world, that my struggle is not one in isolation. There's so many more Black brothers and sisters out there who are having to endure the same struggle as I did. And it politicized me as well, because I knew nothing about what was going on in South Africa or Mozambique, or all the struggles, that Black people were fighting for liberation in the African continent. I knew nothing about that. I knew nothing about history of the Caribbean, knew nothing of the uprisings, so reggae music introduced me to all of that. So I'm forever grateful. And even now, I use it as a life raft, because if I'm feeling down, I might put on a Bob Marley track or any other track that could uplift me and make me feel that little bit better. Everyone needs that.
Yes, yes. You just so eloquently spoke to the power of the arts, period.
Yeah.
Music, visual arts, the written word that can uplift people and help them see themselves and see hope. That's beautiful. I'm so glad that that experience happened to you. So, were there any so music had this big impact. Were there any books, specific books? I know you mentioned some wonderful American authors that you read, but was there any particular book or author that had as profound effect on you as your music did, perhaps?
Yes, there was C. Elijah James, a great Trinidad writer. And he wrote a book called The Black Jacobins, about the slave revolt in Haiti in 1791 that was led by Toussaint Louverture. And I said to myself, after concluding that book, that if that book was introduced to me at school, maybe I would have stayed on that bit longer. because I could actually engage in that history, because all I ever learnt about was Henry VIII and his 6 wives, crop rotation, kings and queens of the England and Scotland and so on. So there was nothing I could really engage with or relate to. But when I read that, and I read that in prison in 1981, I thought, wow, this history has been denied to me. In fact, it probably inspired, it did inspire one of my later historical young people's novels, in Cane Warriors, which is about a slave revolt in Jamaica in 1760. And so that had a profound effect to me and my thinking and my place in the world, if you like.
Wow, 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 wow. So are you working on anything now?
I'm working on another young adult book. So this is part of the Crompton series. I've made up this fictional town called Crompton in the UK, where it's very diverse. It's not just your black neighborhoods, but there's all kinds of different people of diversity in this neighborhood. So I'm trying to tell those stories of young people and how they go about their lives and how they engage with living under the poverty line and so forth. That is always of interest to me, because I'm not sure about the UK. I've got family in the UK, but in the UK, many of us are having a tough time here with the cost of living crisis, with
Yes.
everything going up, oil, bread. I mean, the cost of bread has doubled in the last year or so. And so poor families have to contend with that. And obviously that leads to trouble and strife and stress at home, families trying to cope, young people trying to cope. And so I'm trying to tell those stories, those untold stories that sometimes we don't see in our bookshops and libraries.
Yeah, wow. Well, you are now, I have to go start reading, working from one book to another and read all your
Yeah.
books, because you have inspired me. If our audience wanted to, I didn't ask you if you could recommend a book. You did. You recommended a book, right?
I think I recommended The Black Jacobins, but
Yes.
there's another one that I'm reading
Yep.
right now. It's by a friend of mine. She used to live in the UK. She's now living in New York City. It's called The Niger Wife. It's by an author called Vanessa Waters. I understand it's doing very well, so it's a fantastic read. So I recommend that.
Thank you. And say the title again.
The Niger Wife.
The
Niger Wife.
Niger Wife. Okay. Thank you. Cool. Cool. So if everybody wanted to now everybody's intrigued and you all want to find Alex and you want to find his books. So how can they find you? Where can they find you?
Anybody can find me on my website, which is www.alexwheatle.com. The list of all my books there, reviews and everything else, newspaper articles, any news about me, it's all on my website, so check it out. Also, I'm working on a play. I don't know if you heard of a man called Levi Roots. He's produced this reggae sound clash play, which is based on reggae dancehall music. And so we're going into production very soon. So there's that to look forward to. So I'm going to be a busy boy in the next year or so.
Oh, that is wonderful. Congratulations. That is
Thanks.
awesome. I hope that you will follow Alex. You will go on his website, see what's going on. Let him know that you met him here. That would be so lovely. And I look forward to, I didn't even introduce myself in the beginning. I am Karen E. Osborne, your host, and I am author of Getting It Right, Tangled Lies, Reckonings, and in September, my historical novel, which, Alex, it takes place, my grandmother is a mixed race woman who was born in the Congo, was raised in England, just outside of London, then got married off in Jamaica and ended up in New York in the 1920s. So
Wow.
it's called True Grace, and that comes out in September. So please come back next time. Let me know that you loved meeting Alex. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you for having me.